I can still hear the sound of their laughter. It echoes in my memory like a clock that refuses to stop ticking, steady, mocking, endless. That night at dinner, everything looked normal. The same wooden table, the same dim light flickering above us, the same smell of roasted chicken and rosemary that I'd spent the afternoon preparing. But under all that normal, there was something rotten, something that had been growing for years. David sat across from me, scrolling through his phone with one hand and eating with the other, barely looking up. Emma, my eldest, was fixing her hair with her phone camera, while Ben, my youngest, was laughing at something on his tablet. The only sounds in that room were the clinking of forks and the soft buzz of their devices. 3 people sharing a table, but not a moment. And then I said it. Quietly, carefully, almost like a whisper that escaped before I could stop it. I think I need to leave for a while. For a second, nobody reacted. Then David looked up, eyes narrowing like he was trying to figure out if I'd said something funny or insane. Emma's fork froze midair. Ben chuckled. Then it happened. The laughter. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through me. The kind of laugh that says, "You? Leave? What a joke." David leaned back, his smirk spreading. "Leave? Where are you going, Carol? You can't even spend a weekend without asking me where the car keys are." Emma giggled softly. "Mom, you always say dramatic things when you're tired." Ben added without looking up. "You'd last a day, tops." And they went back to eating. I sat there, still, my throat burning with words I couldn't say. Because what could I say? That I was tired of being invisible? That every smile I gave was just a disguise for how empty I felt? I watched them, each lost in their own world, and I realized something painful. I had built that world for them, by brick, by sacrifice. And somewhere in the process, I had built walls so high that I'd locked myself out. When the dishes were done, I wiped the counter, like I always did. It's funny how even pain can't stop a woman from cleaning up after everyone else. Then I went to my room. Our room. Though ours had stopped meaning anything years ago. There was a time David used to leave little notes on the mirror. "You look beautiful today." Now, the mirror only reflected a tired woman with lines around her mouth and eyes that had forgotten how to sparkle. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the old brown suitcase in the corner. It was covered in dust, its handle slightly cracked. It hadn't been used since our trip to the coast 15 years ago, before the kids got older, before David stopped talking to me, unless it was about bills or groceries. I stood up, walked over, and placed my hand on it. The leather was cold, stiff, but familiar. It felt like touching a memory. Then I opened it. Inside were remnants of another life. A folded scarf my mother had knitted before she passed. An old perfume bottle, almost empty, the scent faint but comforting. And between them, tucked neatly, a faded photograph. It was me, 25 years old, hair tied in a messy bun, wearing a white apron outside a small cafe with a chalkboard sign that read, "Carol's Corner, fresh coffee, fresh starts, my cafe." My dream. Before David convinced me to sell it for the family. I stared at that photograph for what felt like hours. That woman, that younger version of me, looked alive, hopeful, hungry for life. And now, I couldn't even remember the last time I'd felt that way. I began to pack without thinking. A few clothes, my mother's scarf, the photo, a notebook. Each item felt like a small act of rebellion, a whisper saying, "You still exist." The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. From the living room came the sound of the TV, laughter again from some sitcom. It was strange how the sound of laughter had become unbearable to me. Once it meant warmth. Now it was just noise, sharp, hollow noise that reminded me how disconnected I'd become from my own family. At midnight, the wind outside howled softly through the window cracks. The world was quiet, as if waiting. I zipped the suitcase slowly, careful not to wake anyone. But as the zipper closed, something in me opened. A part of me that had been suffocating for years suddenly breathed. I looked around the room one last time, the curtains I'd sewn myself, the lamp David said was too bright, the stack of books Emma once told me to donate because no one reads old things anymore. Every item had a memory attached, not happy ones, just familiar ones. And familiarity can be a very dangerous comfort. When I reached the front door, my hand trembled. For a second, I almost turned back. I could hear their soft snores upstairs, the people I loved, the same ones who never really saw me. And a voice inside me whispered, "Maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe they'll change. Maybe you're overreacting." But another voice, quieter, older, stronger, said, "You've been waiting for tomorrow for 20 years. That was enough." I stepped outside. The night was cold, but it felt honest, the kind of cold that wakes you up. I didn't take the car. I wanted to walk, to feel the earth under my feet again, to remind myself that I was still capable of moving without permission. The streetlights flickered. The air smelled faintly of rain, and for the first time in years, I felt free. But I didn't know then, not even in that moment of quiet escape, that leaving wasn't the end. In fact, it was only the beginning. Because sometimes, walking away doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're finally headed somewhere that makes sense. And in just a few weeks, the same people who laughed at me would come searching. And when they saw where I went, and who I became, their laughter would die in their throats. Not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time, I had found peace. And peace has a way of making others uneasy. The morning after I left home felt unreal. The air outside was cold and sharp, like it wanted to test if I was serious. Every step I took away from that house made me both lighter and more afraid. The sun hadn't risen yet, just a faint purple line across the horizon. I stood on the roadside with my old suitcase and watched the world wake up. Cars passed, people rushed to work. No one looked at me twice, and for the first time in years, I liked that. No one asking, "Where are you going?" No one telling me what to do. Just me and the silence. I didn't have a plan. All I knew was that I needed to go somewhere far from that house, somewhere that didn't carry echoes of arguments and cold dinners. I walked to the bus stop, hands tucked into my sweater sleeves. The bus arrived with a hiss, old and half empty. The driver, a kind-faced woman with silver hair, looked at me through the mirror and asked softly, "Where to, sweetheart?" For a moment, I froze. Then I said the first thing that came to mind. "Maple Hollow. Just as far as you go." She nodded. The door closed with a thud, and the city began to fade. Maple Hollow was a small town about 3 hours away, a place I hadn't seen since I was in my 20s. Back then, it was quiet and full of mom-and-pop stores, the kind of town where people still said hello to strangers. When the bus pulled up near the square, I stepped off and inhaled deeply. The air smelled of rain and freshly baked bread. Church bells rang faintly in the distance, and suddenly it hit me. I had nowhere to stay. I walked aimlessly down the street, suitcase rolling behind me, until I saw an old sign I recognized, Jenkins' Diner, established. 1975. My heart skipped a beat. That name, Jenkins, pulled a memory from deep inside me. I had worked there once, when I was 19, when my biggest dream was to save enough money to open a cafe of my own. The door creaked when I pushed it open. The smell of coffee and fried eggs wrapped around me like an old blanket. The counter was still there, scratched but sturdy, with the same checkered floor beneath. Behind the counter, wiping a mug with a towel, stood Mr. Jenkins. Older now, thinner, but still with that same spark in his eyes. He squinted for a moment, then smiled slowly. "Carol Baker? Is that really you?" Hearing my name spoken with warmth after so long almost broke me. I smiled, blinking back tears. It's been a while, Mr. Jenkins. He chuckled. A while? You mean a few decades? Then his eyes softened. You look like you've been through a storm. I laughed nervously. Something like that. He poured me a cup of coffee, black, strong, and familiar. We sat in silence for a bit, just listening to the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. After a while, he said, "You still make that cinnamon pie of yours?" I shook my head. "Haven't baked in years." He smiled. "Well, you should. That pie used to bring in half my customers." That was the first real conversation I'd had with someone in months. One that didn't feel like walking on eggshells. We talked about old times, the people who'd come and gone, and the fact that the diner was barely staying afloat. He sighed. "It's just me now. The young folks prefer those chain cafes. I'm thinking of closing up soon." Something stirred inside me then. That picture I'd found. Carol's Corner. The younger me who once dreamed of her own cafe. I hesitated before asking, "What if you didn't close it? What if I helped?" Mr. Jenkins looked up from his coffee, surprise written all over his face. "Help? You mean work here?" "Work, manage, clean, whatever you need," I said. I didn't know why the words came out so easily. Maybe because, for the first time, they felt right. He studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Well, I can't pay much, you know. But if you're serious, I'd be glad to have you." And just like that, my new life began. That first day, I scrubbed the floors until they shone. I rearranged the counter, wiped the tables, and polished the sign outside. When I was done, the place didn't just look cleaner, it looked alive. The next morning, I put on an apron and started baking again. Flour on my hands, cinnamon in the air. It felt like remembering who I was. When the first few customers came in, they were surprised to see a new face. "Jenkins finally got help, huh?" a woman said, smiling. "I'm Carol," I told her. "Nice to meet you." By afternoon, word had spread around town that Jenkins's diner had that smell again. The smell of fresh pie. That night, as I locked up, I stood outside and looked at the sign. The yellow light flickered and I saw my reflection in the window. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see a tired, unwanted woman. I saw someone coming back to life. I rented a small room above the hardware store nearby. It wasn't much. Just a bed, a desk, and a tiny window that faced the street. But it was quiet, safe, and mine. Each night I fell asleep to the sound of the rain tapping the window instead of arguments echoing through the walls. As days turned into weeks, the diner started filling up again. Old faces returned, truckers, teachers, tired nurses coming in after night shifts. And they all said the same thing. "Whatever you're doing here, keep doing it." I'd smile and say, "It's just a little cinnamon and a lot of heart." But deep down, I knew what was really happening. I was healing. One pie, one smile, one sunrise at a time. Still, sometimes, when I wiped down the counter late at night, I'd think of home. Of David's cold voice. Of Emma's laughter. Of Ben's indifference. I wondered if they'd even noticed I was gone. Part of me hoped they hadn't. Another part wished they had. But life has a funny way of circling back. Because just when I thought I'd finally found peace, something happened that made the past find me again. It started one afternoon. The bell above the diner door rang, and when I looked up, I froze. Standing there, holding a coffee cup with shaking hands, was Emma. The diner was unusually quiet that afternoon. Rain pressed against the glass windows in soft, rhythmic taps, and the smell of cinnamon pie filled the room. I was wiping down the counter when I heard the doorbell chime. Ding. I looked up, expecting a local. Maybe Mr. Miller for his usual black coffee. But what I saw made the rag slip right out of my hand. It was Emma, my daughter. For a second, I couldn't breathe. She stood there, framed by the doorway, older, taller, with the same hazel eyes she had as a little girl. Her hair was shorter now, styled and sleek, her clothes expensive, her posture perfect. She looked like a woman who had made it, and I suddenly felt small again, like the version of myself I had run away from. "Mom," she said softly, her voice cracked. That one word breaking through 10 years of silence. It didn't sound angry. It sounded scared. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Emma?" She nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. Then, before I could say another word, she crossed the room and hugged me. The smell of her perfume hit me. Clean, expensive, unfamiliar. Her arms wrapped tight around me, trembling. And all I could whisper was, "Oh, my baby, you came." We stood there for a long time, mother and daughter, holding on to something that had been lost for far too long. When we finally sat down, she took a deep breath and said, "I looked for you for years, Mom. Dad said you'd moved to Florida. But last week, someone posted a video of this diner online, said the pie reminded them of home, and I saw you in the background. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Guess my baking's famous again." But my hands were shaking. All the old fears, the shame, the guilt, they rushed back like a storm. "I wanted to come sooner," she said, "but I didn't know if you'd want to see me." Her words hit like a knife. "Emma," I whispered, "I never wanted to leave you. You know that, right?" She stared down at her hands. "Then why did you?" Silence. That single question shattered the fragile warmth between us. I'd practiced this conversation 1,000 times in my head, but now, face to face, every explanation felt too small, too fragile to hold the truth. I took a deep breath. "Because I was dying, Emma. Not on the outside, but inside," she frowned. "Your father," my voice trembled. "He didn't hit me. But every word, every silence, every look, it made me disappear a little more each day. And one morning I realized if I stayed, you'd grow up thinking that was love." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I hated you for leaving," she said, voice shaking. "For so long. I thought you didn't care." "I cared," I said. "I just didn't know how to be alive and stay." The words hung between us like fragile glass, too sharp, too heavy to touch. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the diner lights flickered, reflecting in the tears on Emma's face. She finally whispered, "Dad passed away last year." I froze. "What?" She nodded. "Heart attack. I didn't even know how to tell you." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I didn't hate him. I'd tried to, but I couldn't. Because even broken love still leaves its mark. Then she reached across the table and held my hand. "I didn't come to talk about the past," she said softly. "I came to ask if you'd come home." Home. That word. The same house where I'd felt invisible, where every dream had been smothered, and yet, where my daughter had grown up. I looked at her, the woman she'd become, so strong, so certain, and I realized something. I had built my own home here, with my pies, with laughter, with the quiet sound of rain against the glass. But maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was a moment like this, two hearts finding their way back to each other after years of pain. "I'll visit," I said finally, smiling through tears. "But for now, I think I'm right where I'm meant to be." Emma smiled too, a small, trembling smile that looked so much like mine once did. She nodded. "Then I'll come here. I want to see where you started over." The bell above the door chimed again as another customer walked in. Emma stood, still holding my hand. "Mom," she said quietly, "I'm proud of you." Those words, after all the silence, after all the guilt, were the ones I never thought I'd hear again. I hugged her tightly. And as the rain outside turned into a soft drizzle, I realized something I'd waited a lifetime to understand. I hadn't run away from my life. I'd run toward it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of laughter. It had been years, maybe decades, since that sound filled my home. For a moment, I thought it was a dream, but then I smelled it. Pancakes, butter melting, the faint scent of coffee brewing. And when I walked into the kitchen, there she was. Emma, standing barefoot, flipping pancakes, her hair tied in a messy bun, the same way I used to wear mine when she was little. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Mom. I didn't know if you'd still like pancakes, but I figured some things don't change." I couldn't help but laugh, even through the tears that threatened to fall. "They don't," I said softly. "Especially the way you burn them." She turned the spatula toward me, mock offended. "Hey, I'm Rusty, Hakshasak." It was such a simple moment. Two people in a tiny kitchen, sunlight streaming through the old curtains. But for me, it was everything. Because in that moment, the ache that had lived in my chest for so many years started to fade. We ate in silence for a while, both of us afraid that words might break the fragile peace we'd found. Then Emma set her fork down and said, "I saw the sign outside the diner. May's place. Is it named after Grandma?" I smiled. "Yes. She always told me, when life burns your pie, start baking again." Emma chuckled. Sounds like something she'd say. The diner had been my sanctuary. Every plate, every booth, every recipe carried a story. A small piece of me rebuilding what I once lost. But now, as I looked at Emma sitting there, I realized maybe the diner wasn't just mine anymore. That afternoon, we walked there together. It wasn't busy. Just a few regulars. The same old jukebox humming in the corner. "Wow," Emma said, running her hand along the counter. "You built this all by yourself?" I nodded. "Brick by brick. And a whole lot of tears." She smiled sadly. "I missed so much." I looked at her and said gently, "We both did, sweetheart. But missing something doesn't mean it's gone forever." For the first time, I saw her eyes fill not with anger, but with understanding. Over the next few days, she helped me at the diner, taking orders, wiping tables, chatting with customers. Everyone adored her instantly. It was like watching my younger self. Confident, warm, alive. One evening, as we closed up, she turned to me and said, "Mom, I've been thinking." I looked up. "About what?" "About moving here," she said softly. "I'm tired of the city, the noise, the loneliness. Maybe I could start fresh here too." My heart skipped. "You mean it?" She nodded. "If you'll have me." The tears came before I could stop them. I reached out and hugged her tight. I've waited 10 years to hear those words. From that day on, May's place became May and Emma's. We repainted the sign together, bright red letters, a little uneven, but perfect. People came not just for the pie anymore, but for the story behind it. A mother and daughter who lost each other and found their way back. One rainy night, a young woman came in, drenched, eyes swollen from crying. She said her husband had left her and she didn't know what to do. Without thinking, Emma handed her a towel and said, "Sit down, sweetheart. My mom makes the best pie for broken hearts." The woman smiled through her tears, and I realized life had come full circle. Once I'd been that woman, broken, hopeless, lost. Now I was the one offering warmth to someone else. Weeks turned into months. Emma moved into a small house nearby. We had dinners together, late-night talks, laughter that echoed through the diner. One day, as I was closing up, I found an envelope on the counter. It was from Emma. Inside was a photo of us, standing under the new sign, covered in paint, smiling. On the back, she had written, "You didn't run away, Mom. You ran home." I sat there for a long time, staring at the photo as tears fell quietly onto the counter. All the guilt I'd carried for years dissolved with those words. I looked out the diner window, the rain glistening against the glass, the world soft and calm. For the first time in forever, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow, because tomorrow I'd wake up, unlock the door to May and Emma's, and serve another slice of pie, with a side of forgiveness. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when everything finally makes sense. That morning, the air was soft. The sunlight fell across the diner tables like spilled honey, and the bell above the door chimed lazily with the breeze. It had been exactly 1 year since I first opened the door to this place, broken, alone, desperate to remember who I was. Now, the laughter inside wasn't cruel or mocking. It was warm, familiar, real. The sound of healing. Emma was in the kitchen, humming as she cleaned the counter. Her laughter mixed with the music from the old jukebox. I stood by the window, wiping a cup slowly, thinking about how far we'd come. There were photos on the wall now. Black and white snapshots of smiling faces, handshakes, celebrations, pie contests, and charity dinners. In the center was a frame with 2 pictures side by side. On the left, me, standing outside the diner on opening day, alone, holding a "Help Wanted" sign. On the right, me and Emma, 1 year later, standing under the new sign that read, "May and Emma's Place, where broken hearts find home." As I looked at those photos, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Not pride, not even joy. Peace. Because sometimes, peace doesn't come from forgiveness or closure. It comes from finally living a life that feels like yours. Around noon, a delivery man walked in carrying a small package. "It's addressed to May," he said, handing me the box. I opened it, and inside was a letter. Old-fashioned, handwritten in a neat script I knew too well. It was from David. "Dear May, I didn't know if I should write this, but I needed you to know. I've been traveling, volunteering at shelters, helping people rebuild after floods. It's not much, but it's something. I thought about you every day. I thought about the woman who once sat quietly at the table while I laughed too loud. I thought about how you found the courage to walk away when I couldn't even stand up for you. You were right, May. A home isn't a place. It's a person. And I had mine all along. I just didn't see her. If life ever brings me back your way, I won't come to ask for anything. I'll come to say thank you. David." I sat there, holding the letter against my chest as tears streamed down my face. Not sad tears, not angry tears, just release. The kind that comes when you finally understand that love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. Gracefully. That night, after closing, Emma and I sat outside the diner under the soft glow of the streetlights. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You ever think about going back, Mom? To your old life?" I smiled. "Sweetheart, I never left. I just came home." She looked at me with that same curious spark she had as a little girl. "Home?" I nodded. "Home isn't where you sleep. It's where you heal." The stars blinked quietly above us, and the wind carried the faint smell of pie and coffee down the empty street. Inside, the open sign still glowed faintly in the window, like a beacon for the lost. Maybe that's what I had become. Not a wife, not a housekeeper, not a background figure, but a light. A small, warm light for people wandering in the dark, just like I once was. Weeks later, a local newspaper ran a story about the diner. They called it "The Place Where Second Chances Are Served." And at the bottom of the article, in bold letters, they quoted me saying, "If you ever feel like you've lost yourself, just remember, the road to home always begins the moment you decide to walk toward it." That article went viral. Letters poured in. Women from across the country wrote to say they saw themselves in my story. Some said they were packing their bags that night. Others said they finally forgave someone they'd hated for years. A few said they were booking bus tickets to visit May and Emma's place. And for the first time in my life, I felt like my pain had purpose. Now, every night before I lock up, I take a moment to stand under the neon sign outside. It hums softly, red, gold, and warm, just like the heart that beats inside me. I whisper a quiet prayer for every woman still sitting at her kitchen table, staring at her suitcase, wondering if she's allowed to leave. You are, I whisper. And when you do, you'll find us waiting here with pie and coffee. As I walk away, the lights fade and the world grows still. And for once, I don't need anyone to see me, because I finally see myself.